Welcome to the Kent Lapp podcast.
Let's hear about, I want to hear about your story.
Yeah.
Where you grew up and all that. How you knew you were gay and what age and those types of things.
So grew up in East Tennessee, in Kingsport, Tennessee, in the Tri-Cities. And grew up in like a pretty typical Christian home. I've got a little brother, mom and dad. And,
Anglican?
We did grow up going to an Episcopal church.
Okay.
And then I've kind of been everywhere in between. Then we went to an Episcopal church, and then when a lot of people left the Episcopal church, we went to a Catholic church for 2 years, and then we landed at a Methodist church, and I went to a Southern Baptist and Reformed summer camp, and then in college I went to a PCA church, and then I went to a kind of more progressive Church of Christ church, while attending a campus ministry in college that was also Reformed Baptist. So I've done a little bit of everything.
Yeah, you have.
But I've returned to Anglicanism more broadly over the past 6 years, and have been pleasantly surprised by what was familiar and what I kind of appreciated more now, because I've been in other spaces for so many years in between.
How did you handle the internal knowledge that you were gay? When did you start to sense that, and how did all that play out? Yeah.
So I grew up in a culture and in a church where I don't know if a church, but in a family and in a city where, like, I knew at least the short line: God's against homosexuality. Right, like that. I knew that that's what I was supposed to believe, or that's what the Bible supposedly said. And so, in sixth grade, when I realized that I was attracted to other guys, at first I tried to ignore it, and then I tried to make deals with God. Right? Okay, God, what if I get like straight A's for the next 6 months? Will you take this away? What if I obey what my parents like what they ask me to do, like without question, no protest, will you take this away? If I don't play video games for 6 months, will you take this away? Right? I tried to make these deals with God because I knew my life would be easier if this wasn't something I had to manage, make sense of. And anyway, over and over again, I held up my part of the bargain, and God didn't hold up his part of the bargain.
How old were you
he never agreed to the bargain, so
to be fair,
really blame him.
How old were you at this point?
Sixth grade. I'm always bad with correlating ages.
So sixth grade, so 12-ish, 11 to 12 probably?
That sounds about right, yeah.
Is that kind of the beginning of when you started to notice this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so about 12.
Yeah.
And it's just, where you would maybe look at another boy the way that another 12-year-old might look at another 12-year-old girl? Like, is that sort of like those feelings? Is that sort of how you could tell?
One of the ways that I've heard other people describe it that fits for me is if they'd hear other guys describing what they find attractive in girls, I wouldn't notice that, or that wouldn't register for me. But then over time I would notice, but I am noticing those things in other guys. I am lingering and kind of curious in ways about other guys that my guy friends seem to be about other girls. I
see. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And how do you think about that? Like, God created mankind. He created us male and female. Like, those are the two options, male and female. And the creative design was for male to be attracted to female and female to be attracted to male.
I think so, yeah.
And yet there's all kinds of sin out there and ways that we've messed it up, and would you say like one of those, like hundreds, right, or thousands of but one of those ways or outcomes of sin is that some people become or are just always were, as far as they know, like just attracted to the same sex. Like, is that, how do you think through that? How do you rationalize it?
Right. Yeah. So I talk about it as a brokenness. I think that's a helpful way for me to talk about it. And yeah, so I don't think when God first imagined me being born into a perfect world, I don't think he imagined me experiencing same-sex attraction. But I did develop same-sex attraction, and God didn't stop that from happening. And that happened probably through some mix of genetic predisposition and some kind of environmental factors in my family and whatever. I don't think I had any part in choosing that or making that happen. I don't think there's any of blame of that on me. Mm-hmm. And often people ask me, well, if this isn't what God intended, and yet he didn't stop it from happening, and he doesn't answer your prayers to remove it, that doesn't sound like a good God. Like, how could that be how this works? And at least for me, from like my theological background, we're asking really a question about free will, free process, consequences of our decisions, and God's goodness and providence. And how does that all work out, right? And my only explanation is, whether it's genetic predisposition or the stuff that I experienced in my home growing up, whatever it was that contributed to, and we could see genetic predisposition even as a form of like generational sin. Some people see that as like a manifestation of generational sin. Mm-hmm. So my understanding is I developed same-sex attraction because of the sins and the brokenness of other people that impacted me at a genetic level, at an emotional level, right? Could God have swooped in and protected me from those consequences of other people's decisions? Yes. But if our choices don't have consequences, do we really have choice? Mm-hmm. Right? And so one of the ways that God believes that it's more good to allow us choice and to allow the consequences of our wrong choices to play out in ways that cause us pain, but then us have the capacity to choose to love him, than to take choice away from us but keep us safe. Mm-hmm. It's a greater good, right? So that's how I understand why did God not protect me from developing same-sex attraction? Why has God not taken this away? Well, because God believes that the greater good is for me to truly have choice and others to truly have choice. And more often than not, what that means is for God to allow the consequences of our decisions to play out, even in ways that hurt us.
Yeah.
And hurt others.
Yeah. And even the choice thing, and I agree with what you're saying. And then also too, I mean, you said it earlier, you don't think you would have the same Pieter Valk today if you didn't deal with this, right?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine.
It's hard to imagine. Yeah. I mean, there's things that happened in my life that were extremely difficult, and it's hard to imagine the same Kent Lapp sitting here without those things having happened. Yeah. And so, and would I trade the outcome and the depth and character like that you have developed for dealing with those things? I mean, and then you got to say, well, then some people would say, well, sure, but like God could have still made you the same person you are without having dealt with that. But the problem with that is now you're putting yourself in the place of God, because, in God's providence, you did deal with what you dealt with, or you did go through the pain you went through, whatever that happens to be, the difficulty in life, because we all have it. And like he is working, in all things, that's somehow working for the good in you, and it's developing a uniquely godly, strong you with a certain depth of character that you wouldn't have if you went through those things. And if you want to say, well, sure, there's a way that God could give you those things without having gone through that. Well, of course, but now you're putting yourself in God's seat now.
Right. Yeah. There's only one reality. There's only one universe that we know of. So it's only kind of a mental exercise to try to imagine other things, but it doesn't do us much good. Yeah. This is the story I have. This is the world we live in. And for me, what's been more helpful has been focusing not on, I've made peace with the question of God, why did you not stop this? Why did you not change this? Right. For me, I'm encouraging myself to focus on, how is God redeeming this for my good and his glory? How is God using this for good? How can I lean into that? What is my part to play? How does God want to collaborate with me to make good of broken circumstances? Mm-hmm.